anticipate having more energy and more ability to attend these kind of events in the evening than actually can get here. So I think we should probably go ahead and see, let people join as we go.
Okay. So good evening to all of you who are here. I am going to introduce, well, I don't know, Sana and Alice, did you guys want to say something before we deep dive?
I have nothing at this point, thank you.
Okay. I'll just go ahead then. So we're going to be talking about parenting in difficult times, supporting our children during unprecedented stress. Dr. Heath is an award-winning, internationally recognized professor in McGill's Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology, an expert in student mental health resilience. Dr. Heath has published and presented extensively nationally and internationally on student mental health and currently leads many initiatives to provide students with evidence-based strategies to cope with COVID-19 stress. Furthermore, she has gone through the experience of parenting, being the proud parent of 2 young adults. So we're very happy to have you here tonight, and feel free to take it away.
Great, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you for giving me the chance to be here this evening. You know, it is something I was saying to Karen and Alice earlier, that this is a time period where, you know, I'm asked to speak a lot because the issue of mental health for students of all ages during COVID is so much an issue for everyone. But for parents in particular, you know, we're dealing with really specific challenges. I do want to say that the presentation tonight, I'm leading it and I'm here obviously presenting, but it's very much my team that works together with me, and Stephanie Zito worked on this and she's here tonight, Jessica Metler and Lorianne Bassien, all of whom are part of my team, which works on interpersonal resilience, building within the individual's resilience in difficult times and in good times. So why am I here talking to you tonight? Well, parenting and having, you know, and continuing to live it, you never stop being a parent, is never easy, even in the very best of times and in this really difficult period when we ourselves are trying to cope with our own worries and concerns separate from our parenting role. How do we then support our children as they struggle with what we know are record levels of stress, anxiety, and helplessness? Well, tonight, what I want to go over with you is first, what is stress? I'm sure, you know, most of you already have a strong sense of what this is, but I want to be clear what I am saying and what I'm not saying about stress, so there isn't any misunderstanding, which can happen sometimes. Parenting for support, so parenting strategies around supporting our children during this difficult period. And then really giving stress management strategies and trying them out. So I'm going to ask you to try some things as well that you can use both for yourself and for your kids, or to share with your kids as well. And then some concluding remarks. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So I want to give you information, but I really want some strategy and strategy practice. And what's really important is you're going to walk away from this. We'll share at the end something that my team is really well known for, which is an interactive resource sheet. And I want to explain what this is. Everything that I'm presenting, Karen mentioned, you know, could we share the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint we can share as a PDF, no question. But in fact, it's this interactive infographic that you're going to want to use more, because there all of the critical information is shared. But in addition, there are links that are embedded that you just click on, or your son or daughter clicks on, and it links to a particular resource and walks through the use of a strategy. So it's an audio that you can listen to and practice the strategy, or a visual, or both, some combination. So this is really important because it's not just information written out, it actually links to additional resources. And if you have this, you have the absolute central part of the presentation of what I'm saying tonight. So why is this time so difficult? And I know, I'm, as they say, preaching to the choir here, you're living it. So I don't have to so much tell you, but I do want to sort of walk through what is so especially difficult right now. Well, we know that pre-COVID, regular adolescent students, 33% were reporting experiencing high levels of stress or pressure in their lives. This is just student body as a whole. So that was already really high, and we were already concerned about the level of stress students were reporting. Currently, we're seeing 71% of teens reporting feeling stressed due to COVID, especially regarding how it will affect their school year. If we then look at parents of children with disabilities, with learning disabilities, etc., what they're really concerned about is their children's opportunities to socialize with friends and how that's been impacted. For some of our kids, it's already more difficult to make friends, to keep their social group. And now with the isolation and the disruption in their schooling, this is even more difficult. The loneliness and isolation that comes with that is also a huge concern, specifically for students and students' parents of students with disabilities. The amount of screen time, and particularly the school year and academic success. And you may have heard this morning on the news, I thought it was interesting knowing I was doing this presentation, that the news was talking about how in Quebec, we already have pre-COVID the expectation that of 10 to 15% of our students will not finish or complete, be successful in their exams in math and French at the high school level. Now, during COVID, that number is going up to an expected 20 to 25%. That's a quarter of our students, and that's of the whole student body. Clearly, academic success or academic coping is a huge issue at this time. You combine all of this, and what happens is we're dealing with tremendous level of stress for our children. Our children are experiencing it. And as parents, our worry and concern for our children is really tremendously impacting our own well-being. But when I keep talking about stress, and the whole presentation is focusing dealing with stress, what do I mean by stress? What is stress? Well, we know that stress, as much as, we see that youth or ourselves will say an event is stressful. So for me, working remotely here in my basement, this is stressful. But the event itself, working in my basement, trying to learn remotely, or doing an exam that's very stressful. An event can be stressful, but really it's not so much an event that is stressful or what we're experiencing in itself. It's our own internal experience that is causing the stress. And that happens when we perceive that the demands of our environment exceed our ability to meet them. That's why two people can experience the exact same situation. One finds it very stressful, the other does not. It's because one person is worried about their ability to meet the demands of that situation. So it really is within the individual. But what I want to make clear is in this presentation, when I'm giving you strategies to deal with your stress and for your child's stress, I am not saying that stress is all within you. It's all in your head. It is experienced in your head, but clearly this is influenced by family circumstances, community, institutions such as schools, culture, and historical period or time, which for us is critical. So there's no question that this historical period, this event, is tremendously stressful. So why am I focusing on what you can do internally or what your child can do themselves? Well, because as much as stress is experienced within ourselves, we can influence the other aspects that are stressing us, that are giving us experiences that make us feel like we can't cope. So I can influence the school. I can influence how I cope with COVID, but I cannot control it. However, I can control within myself. I can control using evidence-based strategies and healthy coping that can create a buffer against the harmful effects of stress at the individual level. But I do want to again say, I'm not saying that these environmental situations are acceptable or okay. They are tremendously stressful and challenging and difficult, but we need to first control our own experienced stress to be able to be well enough to try to influence the environment that is stressing us. Right now, the current stressors for parents and your children and students: isolation, the uncertainty, particularly in the Quebec context where the public health system has, it's happening around the world, but particularly here, there has been a larger number of changes in directions. So we don't always know what's going to be happening in the next month or 2 months. And we know that uncertainty in and of itself is tremendously stressful for our children, for students, and for us as parents. Adaptation to working from home or studying from home, separation from loved ones, and for parents, financial uncertainty also can be contributing to this stress. So, what are the principal strategies that I'm going to be talking about for this particular context? What I want to say first is, as I said before, you have the situation or event. So COVID, all the circumstances that are coming with that. That in itself is not by itself inherently stressful or equally stressful for all. It's really what we think about that. And with this particular circumstance, what we're having is that we're having obsessive worries, rumination, really tremendous amount of anticipatory sort of catastrophizing about what might happen to our children, what might happen to us. So that thought, we often can't get away from it, and it goes and goes and goes. So the situation causes a thought, which is like this little hamster that just goes round and round and is impossible to get away from. And that causes the stress response. We're constantly thinking, oh, what if this? What if that? What if this happens? Or, you know, I can't do this anymore. Or even, I wish I'd done something differently in the past few months. Looking backwards, looking forwards, all of these contribute to the stress response. So included in the interactive infographic that we're going to provide and what I'm going to talk about tonight are 4 sort of categories of principal strategies to deal with stress, to really decrease the stress response and dial it down when you're having it as well, for you and for your child. These really break that cycle. It basically effectively decreases the impact of that situation event by actually diminishing the repetitive thinking and diminishes the stress response. And they fall into 4 categories: the pause break, which I'll explain in a bit, the enhancing positive awareness, kindness to ourselves, and social connection. But before we get into the detail of the strategies, I want to, as I mentioned earlier, talk about supportive parenting strategies. The first one that is really critical, and I speak as a parent of, 2 kids who both themselves had anxiety and some specific difficulties in dealing with the school setting at all different levels, and now they're young adults and doing knock wood, as well as one can hope as a parent. And what we see over and over, and I've experienced, is that when my child is dealing with a really difficult circumstance and they're very upset, as a parent, I feel their pain, I think, more in some ways than they do. I worry more. I get extremely concerned. And as a parent of a student with a disability, you feel this even more. You worry so much about what this might mean. So when my daughter would come home and she would be really upset about something that happened at school, and my daughter's style was to cry and get extremely upset. When that happened, I would feel just so overwhelmed by her upset that I would problem solve very quickly. I would say, and the examples of this is, I would say things like, well, I'm sure she didn't mean it. It was often about friends or issues with peers. I would say, I'm sure she didn't mean it. Why don't you text her and see if she actually meant that? Or, what about if I call her mother, who I'm a friend with, and just check, or I would try to do something to, really figure out a way out of this. Or I would very, quickly say, it's not that bad, or you could do this instead, or why don't you distract yourself? What we know from a lot of evidence at this point is that this is not beneficial to our children's well-being and their ability to cope with stress. Because what we're saying is we shut it down. We shut down what they're feeling. So what we need to do is pause and really take the time to listen to what they're saying, no matter how painful or difficult it is to listen to that. Validate what they're saying so that we're not saying, oh, it's not that bad, or you could do this to feel better right away, and to really let them feel what they're feeling. Just in the way of being able to do that, it relieves a lot of stress. And if you think with your own friends or partner, or perhaps with your own parents, you can think of what it's like when you say, this has happened and I am so upset, I was so upset, and the partner immediately jumps in and says, well, what you should try is, how that makes you feel. It doesn't make you feel like any better about what has happened. It actually makes you feel worse. So instead, what we suggest is you pause, you listen, you validate, you empathize, and then after a little time, when they've had a chance to feel what they're feeling, the upset, with you being supportive, then you support your child in problem solving rather than problem solving for them. And this sometimes requires a lot of guidance, but it's a different thing to sort of say, well, what are you thinking of doing? How are you thinking of handling that? And say, well, what do you think might happen if you do that? Then it is for me to say, well, why don't you call her and talk to her right now? Or why don't we talk to them? Really giving them the chance to learn that problem solving is an important step. The next supportive parenting strategy is something that those of you, I saw some as you were signing in, I know you're aware of this, was a technique first suggested by Richard Lavoie way back in the 1990s for parenting with students with learning disabilities. But it works, I present it to all parents. It's the idea that you want to build money in the bank in your relationship, specifically, even more so with teens, but at any age. And what money in the bank is feel good quality moments. This can be achieved through saying something really positive to your child. So even though they may not have emptied the dishwasher, they may not have done any of the chores you wanted them to do, you consciously pick up on saying something positive numerous times every day, if possible, thinking of it as money in the bank. And why do we need this relationship, money in the bank, of sort of establishing a positive relationship? Well, because we're going to have negative parenting moments. And during COVID times, we're going to have more of them. We're overwhelmed, we're stressed, we're with our children more than we normally are, and they're stressed. So we're going to have this. So we have to really put more money in the bank during this time than ever before. And it's harder. We have to do it consciously, really making a note to ourselves to do that. Because when we have negative parenting moments, we're effectively spending the money in the bank, so to speak. So then the next sort of supportive parenting approach, which is related to sort of money in the bank in an adjacent kind of way, is that we need to be a safe haven in a storm. And right now it's a real storm for our children. It is for us as well, but they really do not know how they're going to get through this. They're really worried about this. It's completely something that they can't imagine how they're going to manage this. And we may feel the same way, but when your child is feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and generally stressed, we need to be able to be validating, listening, empathizing. So kind of like a rock or a safe haven in a storm. But I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling much like a rock or a safe haven. And I don't have young children or teens at home. So, you know, it can be tremendously difficult to do this. So that is why the strategies that we're going to share with you, that you need to use them. So as much as this is about how to give your children, your child, the strategies for them to cope with the stress, one of the central parts of that is for you to be able to do it. So it's a two-pronged approach. The other thing that we do know from a lot of research, which I hate to hear because both my children have had anxiety, well, continue, it's not something you outgrow, have some anxiety, and I know I do as well. So, you know, the anxiety has a strong genetic aspect, with upwards of 30% being due to genetic sort of inherited characteristics. So given that that is the case, well, it means that we have to take care of ourselves. And knowing that's the case, look at yourself when you're starting the feeling that we do as a parent of when my child is having difficulties and I start feeling this just, you know, I'm up at night worried about what's going on. You know, I'm constantly thinking about what might happen, and realize that this could well be partly coming very much from your own anxiety issues. And you need to be able to, you know, do this critical step, which is modeling versus telling. So you have to be able to cope with stress and not just tell your child how to cope with it, but to really model it and to explicitly model. So if I give you an example, if I'm saying, if I finish a day and I say, I just had a really difficult time with my boss in the Zoom meeting and it was really, awful. I was told that I have a whole bunch more work to do and I'm already feeling overwhelmed. And I get off that call and in front of my child, I say to my partner, or I just say even to my child, that was so awful. I have had such a hard day. I need to, have that glass of wine. I've got to get my wine. Or I'm just going to sit down and eat those brownies. I don't care because I've had a crap day. What I'm clearly saying is that the way to handle that really difficult day is a substance or eating, etc. If we explicitly walk through and say, this was a really horrible day. I really feel like just sitting down and eating that whole pan of brownies. But you know what? I know that I need to do something else. So I'm going to go for a walk. Or I'm just going to go into my room and take a few minutes to myself and literally say that in front of your child. It's more effective than if we tell them what to do, especially for teens. And they won't look like they're taking it in at all. But in fact, they do, and they will start doing it, probably not when you're around because they don't want you to see that they're taking your advice, but they will internalize it and they will learn over time, which is why it's so important for you to model this and taking care of yourself. And as much as we can, and in the strategies that I'll share with you, I'll show you how you can do this, in the home environment, creating a positive environment that as a family or, for yourself and with your loved ones in the home, you are showing how you're trying to act on sort of stress management strategies to be responsive instead of reactive. So instead of being upset because of a bad day and having an angry outburst, you're saying, you know what, I've just had a hard day and I need to just step back for a minute. That creates a positive environment. What is important is walking through. So just doing it and not actually talking about what you're doing won't always be picked up on by our kids because they just don't watch us that closely. So we do have to keep sort of trying to say something and walk through how we're doing it. But what happens, especially during now, when it really is so difficult to parent and we are overwhelmed and we're dealing with our own issues? One of the things that we will provide in the interactive infographic and that I encourage you to use is to get help, even if you're not in crisis, if you need it. Because what we do know is that parenting right now is so challenging. It is easy, and we're seeing more parents crossing the line where they know that what they're doing is, emotionally abusive, physically abusive. And it's not because, anyone's a bad parent. It's because they're dealing with their own stresses to such a degree that we've never seen before. So it is okay to reach out before you feel it's so severe. And if you do feel it's severe, you can reach out and it can be anonymous and get some support. So these will be provided as well. So the specific strategies, as I said, one of the first ones is the pause break. Second one is positive awareness, kindness to self and social connection. So let's start with really the pause break. The pause break really means the ability to take a pause or a break from all of the worry and that little hamster on the wheel that goes and goes and goes, and anything that allows you or your child to do that is a good thing. So sometimes I hear parents really concerned that their child is online for Zoom all the time already, and then they go on and they do some online gaming at the end of the day, and they want them off the screen. Or they see them, you know, constantly on the computer doing something. And it's like, well, I want you to get outside, get some fresh air, or do something else. And I agree, definitely we want them to do that. But what is most important for their stress and well-being is to permit them to do whatever allows them to literally get away from the worry and the thinking and the stress that they're experiencing. And this goes for you as well. And what works will be different for every person. So some people, you know, doing some artwork, doing a creative outlet. Many young people listening to loud music will break this negative thinking. Reading a good book doesn't always work for young people so much anymore. But, you know, exercising, intense exercise can help. Whatever allows a break should be permitted and encouraged at certain times through the day, or even for a little period at the end of the day to break up the stress reaction. But one way that we know is tremendously helpful is mindfulness. And what exactly am I describing as mindfulness? I'm sure many, if not all of you, have heard mindfulness. It's everywhere right now, has been for the last few years. It's really defined as paying attention to what we are sensing, like using our 5 senses, or what we're experiencing in our head, our thoughts, in the present moment. So really right now, not thinking of the future or the past, on purpose. So it's not just letting our mind notice what we're feeling, but purposefully, effortfully working on that. And with acceptance. So you're not liking it or not liking it, you're just noticing it, you're just observing it. But why am I pushing mindfulness? Is it like the new fad and this is what we want to, you know, say just because it's a hot topic? No, the real reason I'm suggesting mindfulness for you as parents during COVID, with particularly of students who may have some difficulties in school, is that parenting in these circumstances is so difficult. And we know from a wealth of research and current practice that mindfulness techniques that I'm going to share with you tonight are being used for, like, the military, paramedics, CEOs, and elite athletes, for them to be able to cope and think clearly and be responsive in tremendously stressful situations. And if it works in these kind of circumstances, this is kind of what parenting feels like right now. It feels a little bit like a war or a tremendously demanding situation. So it works in these kind of demanding situations. Also, we know that mindfulness works for students with learning disabilities in decreasing anxiety, increasing social skills, making them more responsive instead of reactive, and increasing academic performance. For students with ADHD, we see a similar pattern, as well as increasing attention. And for students on the spectrum, we see again the same kind of benefits. So mindfulness is beneficial for students with disabilities as well. And what we do know is if we want to use it with students with learning disabilities, we need to adapt the activity to your child's strengths and weaknesses. There's not one approach because, as you know, I don't have to tell you, every student with a learning disability is different. So it's not like it's a cookie cutter and a category that fits, that, you know, all kids with learning disabilities have similar strengths and weaknesses, not at all. So it really is adapting the specific strategy to what your child likes and enjoys and letting them, they will tell you, and providing them with a buffet of different strategies. So they try out a whole bunch. Mindfulness is not do this. This is mindfulness. This is what works. Mindfulness has many different ways of being achieved. And you need to try all different ways. And we're going to give you a bunch. And we're going to give you links to a whole bunch more. And then we have really seen what is best and what they're most comfortable with. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is coming to your senses. And this is under the break or pause. It sort of allows a momentary pause in your day to break up the stress reaction. So you can use it with any sense, and in the interactive infographic at the end, there's links to all the different senses. But tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to just try, you're going to do with me, the one that is touch. And what I want you to do is use your hand and your arm like this, and you're just going to stroke lightly from your hand up your arm like this. And I want you to notice as you do that, how that feels. And do it as lightly as you can, like a tickle. And then I want you to do it more firmly, almost like a rub. And then I want you to squeeze, 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 and then back to tickle lightly, lightly. And that's coming to your senses. You can stop and just notice that if you can do that for a few seconds under the table, in a meeting, whatever, and focus your attention on the feeling in your arm. Different people, depending on their particular sort of ways of experiencing sensory information, may prefer a squeeze, some prefer a light tickle, but noticing the feeling. And you can do this in many different ways, and it really gives you a mindfulness moment that you can break through the day. The next strategy we're going to try is really central to decreasing a stress response, and I imagine most of you have heard a version of this, and it's mindful breathing. And this, we're going to do 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths. And the key to this particular method is that you have to inhale through the nose, hold for 2 seconds, exhale for longer than you inhaled, and you exhale through the mouth and you hold. So there are 4 parts to the breath. In, hold, out, hold, in, hold. And it's in through the nose, out through the mouth. We're going to try this, and I'll show you the link that we give you shows you this as well, that you can share with your child, where you're going to watch this circle, and the circle will breathe in through your nose, and you'll see hold, and then it will walk you through this process. And we're going to do 3 breaths, and I'm just going to say a few words as you're doing it. And I want you to try this. So we're going to start breathing in through our nose. Hold, out through the mouth. Hold, in through the nose. Hold, out through the mouth. Hold, in through the nose. Hold, out through the mouth. Hold. What you'll notice with that is that it's different depending if you have asthma, if you're very fit, if you're young, or if you're old. This particular 4262 is for an adolescent or an 8-year-old and up. So once you get over 25, you might find this hard to do because it feels like you're trying to breathe in too much, or if you're a smoker, or if you have asthma. So you can adapt it as long as the same thing of breathing in for a certain amount, hold out for longer, and it relaxes the body. And counting is very helpful. It's really good right before an exam or when an individual is in a really stressful situation. The next strategy is progressive muscle relaxation. And this, again, many of you may have already heard about. And what this does is you do not have to believe in it. You do not have to think it's a good idea. It will still work. And you want to do it, we're going to tense and relax large muscle groups. And we're going to do it in a way that your child could do it in an exam, or you could do it in a Zoom meeting. Normally you scrunch your face, but we're not going to do that because we want to show you how you can do it even if you're in a Zoom meeting. So put both feet on the floor, put your hands on your lap. And I'm going to start with, I want you to tighten your fists as hard as you can. Tighten, 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 tight, tight. Feel those tight fists. And then let them go and feel the blood go back in and how warm they feel. Tighten your arms up your forearm, up past your elbow. You're going to tighten as hard as you can. Tighten, tighten, tighten. The muscles are so tight. Tight, 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 tight. As tight as you can. Hold, hold, hold. Relax and feel how that feels. Then you're going to tighten your shoulders, and you can bring them up by your ears. Tighten, tighten, tighten. Hold, hold. Tight, tight, tight. Let it go. And then tighten your core, the whole main part of your body. So your back is tightening, your abs are tightening, your chest is tight. You're holding like you've got a corset on and it's closing tight, 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 right through every part of your core. As tight as you can. Hold, hold, hold. Let it go. Relax. Tighten your buttocks and your upper thighs. Tight, tight, tight. You're almost coming off your chair. The muscles are so tight. You can feel it super tight, tight, tight. Harder, as hard as you can. Hard, hard. Let it go. Relax. Tighten your calves and your feet. Curl your toes, your calves, whole lower legs. Tight, tight, tight. You're almost getting cramps in your toes as you're tightening them. Curling them up in your shoes or slippers. As tight as you can. Let it go. And now feel the whole body just as heavy and relaxed as possible. If one time doesn't do it, you go through again. But that in itself really decreases the stress response. So this is also in the interactive infographic with a clear description and walkthrough of how to do that. Then the other clear pause that we need to have is around sleep. So these are some strategies that are also in the interactive infographic. Yoga Nidra, which is not your typical yoga, but it's an audio that walks through becoming aware of different parts of your bodies in a way that disrupts the worriness. And a lot of people really like this. And young people also do, but some do not. So you have to try and see if you like it. Otherwise, boring bedtime stories for adults or youth. So you can do these. These are all free, and we give links in the interactive infographic. Or a weighted blanket, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. That can also be very effective for sleep for many individuals. Then we have the positive awareness. And the reason we want to talk about positive awareness strategies for you and your children is that we know that evolutionarily, our mind is adapted to sort of see the potential threat everywhere, to see the negative. We pick up on the negative. So you can go through a day and see almost always negative things. I'm sure you've experienced this. You come out of a day, and out of your whole day, what you remember most are the things you did wrong, or the things you feel you should have done better, things that went wrong. This is the way our mind works. So we have to force our mind to get out of the rut of thinking and picking up, sort of being like flypaper for negativity, and instead focus on some of being able to see the positive moments, because no matter how bad things are, there are fleeting positive moments. And these approaches that I'm going to share with you have been found through research to be very effective during extreme grief responses, palliative care. So circumstances where things really are terrible, and yet you can still sort of have an increased positive emotion, which is protective and enhances well-being overall. So we want to enhance your ability to notice positive moments, and we do that using noticing positive moments and 3 good things. So let's look at doing that. We're going to try this. So we want to enhance your ability to notice the tiny little moments that are good in your day. This might be something like, for you or your child, the feeling of the shower, the warm water on your shoulders, eating a favorite food, or walking in the sun and feeling the sunshine on your face. So what, if you think of this, if we try it now, and then I would suggest you do it with 3 things sort of at the dining room table, or the next time, make it a regular part of, when you talk to your child, if possible. So I want you to think now, in the last 24 hours, of something that you enjoyed. It could be as small as the first sip of coffee this morning. It could be a favorite food. It could be a cuddle with a pet. It could be, as simple as putting on your cozy slippers after wearing outdoor boots. So think of something, a pleasant moment that you had in the last 24 hours. If you have that in your mind, I want you to really think of how it made you feel in your body and in your mind. Savor it. Literally try to be in that moment of whatever that pleasant, momentary experience was. Notice how it feels in your body. Notice maybe how your face feels, what your thoughts are. And the idea is you want to almost relive that positive moment. If you do this with your child at the dining room table and say, tell me one thing. And we sometimes say, if you can, get it out of your kid to say 3 good things that happened. But even getting one, in the last 24 hours, and make it a habit. One little thing that I enjoyed that was really nice today. And not necessarily gratitude, which is also very effective, just a positive moment. So that way, when they come up with that, over the next 24 hours, over time, you actually start noticing it when it's happening more. So this can be very effective. Then the next sort of group of strategies we know is protective is kindness to self, or self-compassion. And I think you've probably heard of this one before. Self-compassion is the ability to be kind to ourselves, to how we might treat a friend or a loved one, to treat ourselves that way, to be as kind to ourselves as we are to others. And often people have a negative reaction to this and don't do this well, but research shows that if we can be kinder to ourselves, it's actually associated with better functioning under stress because it helps us to be persistent. So sometimes people will tell us, you know what, if I'm self-compassionate, I'm actually sort of letting myself off the hook. I need to push myself to do better. But in fact, we know that if we can be kinder to ourselves, it increases our functioning under stress, our motivation, and our ability to be resilient. In order to build this, if it doesn't come naturally to you, we have in the interactive infographic, we don't have time for it tonight, but a loving kindness meditation that you can actually listen to, and over time that will enhance your ability to be kinder to yourself by thinking kind thoughts aimed at others and then towards yourself as well through a meditation kind of mode. I encourage you to try it. It's actually a really interesting process. Then we have the social connection. And we know social connection is critical to cope, sort of support networks. It's hard for young people to do that, particularly now. But what you can do is random acts of kindness. You can sort of do pro-social behavior. So just doing something nice for someone else, we know is associated with happiness and well-being and a decrease in stress, anxiety, and depression. So even if we encourage our child to do something small for others, you know, they can help a neighbor shovel snow, bringing a parent a glass of water. So if you know that, you know, you or someone in the house is on a Zoom call that's going on forever, you know, if a child actually brings someone a glass of water saying, you know, I thought I'd bring it to you, or a cup of tea or whatever it is, something small like that can actually make a difference in how they feel about themselves. Baking something for someone, etc. This is a way that, and it's also very important for young people in general to feel that they have a way of doing something for others. Too often, everyone's doing for them and they don't feel empowered to do for others. So we know that volunteering is very associated with well-being in young people. And they can do it right now. You can't go somewhere, but there are volunteering opportunities that you can do online or doing phone calls to seniors who are more isolated. The other thing for social connection is groups online and communities. And I know there's a lot of worry about young people being online, but in fact, finding communities around shared interests, particularly for students with disabilities who may have, you know, unique interests or may have difficulty connecting with their peers in the regular school environment. There's so many cool, interesting online communities that can share some of their interests and where they can connect, even if it is remotely. And we know that the social connection online is social connection. So as much as it may not be the same as in person, it still has a protective element. So in the end, I do want to highlight again the interactive handout, which I believe Karen has to make available, but we can also put it in the chat. Steph, I think, has the link, and you can download it and use it and share it. It has a part for you as well as the part to share with your child. And the key thing, as I said, all this information is in there, but they're also active links. So look for like each of the senses you can click on. You can click on all the different kind of breathing and progressive muscle relaxation that will walk you through, as well as all the resources and other resources that I didn't have time to go through with additional strategies in this area. So in conclusion, it is a very stressful and uncertain time. And parenting in this, you know, circumstances It's not about perfection. Under these circumstances, oh, really okay parenting is amazing. So really be kind to yourself and say, if I'm just managing okay, I'm doing just amazing right now. And now I think we'll open it to questions. And I believe, Karen, you wanted to say people can put it in the chat or they can raise their hand, right? I'll get rid of the, I'll stop sharing so we can see people.
Yeah, hi everyone. You can either send your question into the chat to me, or you can click on the reactions button and raise your hand, and I'll call on you so that you can unmute yourself. It's up to you. It depends how many questions we have. So feel free to either send it by chat or wave. Oh, there's a question here. It says, how do we help our children if they are refusing to go to school due to anxiety?
Yes, that's a tough one. I mean, if our child is refusing to go to school due to anxiety, it depends partly on the age of the child. Can you, Patricia, clarify the age? Okay, so 12. All right. With that, I would say, first of all, get the supports. We're very aware of the fact that our students are dealing with, you know, incredible, I mean, prior to COVID, we were seeing anxiety levels that were very, very high. Now we're seeing off the charts. First thing that I would do is reach out to the school and make sure that the school psychologist is on board. And then the school should have a procedure to sort of handle this. But in general, my approach, we know anxiety, what we talk about with anxiety is it's like feeding the monster. When someone has an anxiety about a particular situation, if it's a little difficult with COVID because there are risks, right? So it's not just an anxiety without basis. But generally speaking, it's not, as long as there are certain things that child can do to control, which they can. I would say, what do you have control of? You can wear a mask. You can even double mask if you feel that's extra safe. You can go in, you can be sure to wash your hands. If you do those things, the risk is low. So give them the facts, the same as for a student who is afraid of something that does not have risk. So you give them the facts first, and then show them what is in their control. And then I would teach them sort of the management in terms of the anxiety strategies that we talked about, the breathing, etc., and have them try and go for short periods of time and find out that they are safe, that they are okay, and then that will become more comfortable over time. We're seeing this actually in workplaces, even with adults, where adults are afraid to come back into the workplace. They're having anxiety about it. And what we do know is that, A, you emphasize what you can control, that it's not like you can get COVID through equally if you walk in without a mask and you don't wash your hands, and you wear a mask or even 2 masks and do wash your hands. So you do have a lot of control. They need some control, and they need to be exposed to this situation in small amounts so they can see that they're safe. They go for half a day and they're okay. They go for another half a day, they're okay, and build up. But I would talk to your school psychologist as well, because they should be supporting you in this process. Because the problem is, if your child already was prone to anxiety, this will have become much worse. And it's very difficult to know what is reasonable COVID anxiety and what is great. So you've already been helping. When it crosses the line to no longer being reasonable, you know, COVID anxiety, because not all anxiety is reasonable when it comes to COVID. right? I mean, we can see for ourselves and our children, it can get to the point where it's tipped into really an anxiety disorder. It's not a reasonable level of anxiety anymore. Other questions?
There's another
Okay.
question.
Yep,
My 13-year-old. Okay. I'm
Oh,
going to
well,
read
you
it
can
out
read it.
loud for
Yes,
the recording.
Yes, exactly.
My 13-year-old boy has extreme ADHD. His school has limited resources to help children like mine throughout the day. He is sent home weekly due to his disruptive behavior. Any suggestions on how to deal with this?
Right. I would say, I mean, this is, I'm not sure if the disruptive behavior is due directly to the ADHD or if it's related to the stress of the situation. So is this something that predated COVID and predated sort of the anxiety issues? I think we missed a question as well in terms of the daughter. But if it is a stress related, then I would say, you know, limited resources, I would really look at the strategies we're sharing, because a 13-year-old boy, even with extreme ADHD, things like, excuse me, the calming breath that we talked about, that can be useful. Progressive muscle relaxation can be useful. Using an intense exercise, so when he's feeling like he's going to have an angry outburst, having the option of running up and down stairs to have an intense outlet, physical outlet, to get a calming response, those can all be helpful. But when a child with ADHD has an outburst, what it is there's an frustration, extreme, intense emotion, and an inability to inhibit a reaction. So it's a reactivity. So what you need to do is teach emotion regulatory strategies to be able to stop that immediate action. You have to create a pause. You need to, between, I can't stand this, and blow up, you have to have the, to feeling that coming on and saying, okay, I'm gonna do my progressive muscle relaxation, I'm gonna do my running on the stairs, I'm gonna do whatever I need to get that little pause before I blow up. There is a time between something's happening and I blow up, and you've got to expand that time frame. You see what I'm saying? Okay, limited resources. And should we go to the 12-year-old?
Yeah.
My daughter, okay.
Yeah, my daughter's 12, 2, goes to Vanguard School. Beside her ADHD, learning disability, and anxiety, she's been diagnosed with after-school restraining collapse. How can I approach her when she leaves school? She was like a volcano ready to explode.
Yeah, that is very challenging. What I would do is I would look up resources related to distress tolerance. So if you look for distress tolerance, things like using a intense physical exercise, again, because distress tolerance is a technique where that we use as a part of dealing with individuals with quite severe mental health difficulties or intense distress, to try to calm the body. And there are many different tips that you can use, but the key to, and you have to choose what works for your child, but the key to all of them are things like intense temperature swings. So something like a cold shower or a warm bath, running. We really recommend, and in fact, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that if you can have an intense aerobic activity, so as soon as coming out of school, I don't know her health ability in terms of being able to run, etc. But if she can, literally running can be very helpful. If not, I would say cold, like splashing cold water on her face, something like that. Or the other thing is a physical tightness, sort of think of it as cuddling or a heavy weighted blanket, something like that. But usually you need more the intense exercise if you can do that. I would try that, but also look at distress tolerance techniques, because that is what you're going to need in that situation. I think we have another one.
You've gotten some thank yous.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, here's another one. My son is 13 years old. During this time, he finds comfort in connecting online with his friends after school and on the weekends. Although I'm happy he is connected, I find sometimes it is too much time online. What is the best strategy to manage their online time?
Yeah, that's a great question and a common question right now. Online time, the connection is critical. So you know, if we can arrange something like going sledding safely within the guidelines, doing something like sledding can be a good outdoor activity that is fairly safe. You're not going to get kids of that age to go for a walk together. You're not going to get them doing that kind of thing. But at this point, I would worry less about their online time if they're connecting, because they need that social connection. That is tremendously protective against what they're going through. So although I understand the concerns about online, you can get creative with the online activities, so they can have different kinds of online, activity games, as well as the online gaming, which is not all bad. If it is getting to the extent where he's losing sleep, then I would be concerned. But otherwise, given that they're not having the opportunity to do sports together, to meet up after school together in the way they normally would, I wouldn't worry too much about the online connecting. I would worry more if your son was not connecting. I'm worried more about the kids who are getting increasingly isolated. I think we had one from, would you agree if ASD student is anxious and there's only way to deal with stress, their only way to deal with stress is through self-stimulating? Do we allow them to self-stimulate? This is a tough one, because what we generally always say is you want to teach a healthier coping than self-stimming, because it actually is reinforcing. You want to break that cycle wherever possible. I assume you have some supports from the school, so I would ask them how they're handling it in any kind of in the school circumstance, because if they're controlling it in the school environment and then your child comes home and they're having anxiety at home and this is their only comfort and you're at your wit's end, then I wouldn't worry too much if it's a small amount of time. But generally speaking, we don't want to encourage self-stimming behavior, because it does reinforce itself and it becomes worse. But it's kind of the same thing as I'm giving to the other parent who's saying online, too much online. The reality is the self-compassion. As a parent, there are worse things to do if you're really struggling and your child is really struggling, and this is the one comfort they have, and you are you just need to not engage with trying to stop them at this time. That's okay. This is unprecedented times. Give yourself a break, allow them to engage in the self-stimming behavior, and work towards continuing to try and break that engagement.
I'm not seeing any more questions. I don't know if you have any in your particular chat.
No, I don't think I'm seeing any.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think somebody wanted to say a few words. Pam, are you there? There we go.
There we go. You could see me and you could hear me. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Nancy, for coming tonight and giving us so many tools and for talking about our particular kids. I mean, all kids are going through a rough time, but our kids very often have anxiety that goes with the other symptoms that they have. So it was wonderful to have you and to hear your suggestions. And I'm sure that people are going to make use of your handout. I've downloaded it personally. And I think it's great. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. And I do want to say the other thing is, if you are not familiar with how to download from the chat, I'm sure that if you email me or Karen, that we could email you the link to the resource, because I really want to make sure everyone has it. And I do see there was one question that I want to just address before letting people go, because I hate for a parent not to have an answer in terms of my son tells a lie often, what should I do? And I would just say in response to that question, and it's a broader answer, which is a good note to end on. Whenever, our kids are doing something like telling a lie, something that, or having an angry outburst, it really is critical to figure out, why do they feel they need to do this? So why is your son feeling the need to tell a lie? What is the situation that he feels his only out in his mind is to tell a lie? And a colleague of mine, Victoria Tawar, does great work on lie-telling behavior. And she says punishing a lie just on itself actually does not decrease the lying behavior. Instead, talking about why are you lying, and why do you feel the need to lie, and giving them other options is better. So any behavior that is a problem behavior, like lying, angry outbursts, really analyze the situation about, why do our kids feel in their own head, in their own thinking, that this is the only way they can manage the situation. That's how we'll get them to stop the problematic behavior, not by punishing the problematic behavior, because they're just doing the best they can, in their own mind, right? So thank you again. And I really, I would say both my kids had their own issues at different times in their life, throughout, and continue, it's not over. And I'll say to you that one thing I have learned after 27 years of parenting is that it's often not as bad as it seems in the moment. So, and I think you have some great mentors here. This organization is great to keep realizing that, we will be okay, in the long run. And I'm optimistic, even with COVID, that our kids will get through this and will actually have learned a lot in ways that are maybe not as school related. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all tonight. And take care, be safe, and be well.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was very, very interesting.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Thank you for this wonderful session. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
Our pleasure.
I'm going to be sending the